Hi there. So I've been looking for a way to spread awareness and hope to those living with HIV. A couple of days ago, I stumbled upon the ImGladIKnow movement. And I'm so glad people are working hard around the world to eradicate this stigma that having HIV or AIDS makes you dirty in some way. So I hope that I can share my story of a woman and my experiences and my fears. Here goes, and I apologize in advance for any parts that are difficult to hear. It begins in Romania in 1989. A pregnant 18-year-old with a choice: have the baby and be banished from the family, or put the baby up for adoption. The young woman knew that if she kept the baby, it would be a tough life, just her and the baby, as her partner had all but disappeared when he found out she was pregnant. She wasn't ready to have a child. With no money, home, husband, or means to support herself, she did what was best for her child and took her to the orphanage. It wasn't long after that when a Canadian couple who wanted a child came to Romania in search of their new family. The baby girl was sick and undernourished, being fed only homogenized milk and being held for only as long as needed to feed her. During the nearly 2 months it took for the new parents to get all the paperwork in order, they would come and visit her daily and longed to take the child home. If you don't know the history of Romania, at this time the country was trying to rebuild itself, as the structures of communism were crumbling around them. One day the new parents went to the orphanage to visit as usual, only on this day she wasn't there. After some rough translating and some confusion, they learned that their new baby had been taken to the local hospital. Their child was sick and needed a blood transfusion. Later that day, she was returned to the orphanage, and just a few days later she was cleared, along with her new but older brother, to be taken back to Canada. These new parents were so overjoyed they had traveled across the world to start their family, and through a civil war, dangerous uprisings, and more than a few close calls, they now had 2 beautiful children, nearly every parent's dream: 1 boy and 1 girl. It wasn't even a year later, when visiting family in the US, that the little girl got sick. And as anyone who's been a new parent knows, they took her straight to the doctor. And they couldn't have been any luckier, as after a careful examination by a doctor in New York City, they were told that they better talk to an expert here in Canada. And upon returning home, they were referred to one of the best doctors in HIV treatment here in Vancouver. She was immediately put on careful balance of medication and showed signs of improvement over the next few years. And despite some complications from the early medications that may have resulted in heart abnormalities, she showed many signs of overall health. For years, this girl grew up not knowing what was inside her, and not knowing that not everybody saw doctors every 3 months. Now let me stop here and tell you something. Something that hasn't always been easy for me to say. That little girl's me. That little girl is the woman in front of you today. And I stand here at 25 years old and at least 24 HIV positive. And guess what? I'm glad I know. It hasn't always been easy to come to terms with how HIV affects my life. The reality is that my parents never told me. They never told anyone. They were afraid that if they told me, I would tell my friends, and then my friends would tell their parents. You see, it was the 90s, and the abbreviations of HIV or AIDS were whispered. So my parents were afraid, and they worried that my friends or their parents would shun me, and that I would be left with no one. I understand their fears because I had them too. And when the doctors finally convinced my parents to tell me, when I was 14, I was scared. I wondered what my friends would think. Would they be afraid of me? Would they run away, or would they just stop talking to me altogether? So I started by telling just one friend. When I told her, she just shrugged and stayed by me. I told other friends slowly, one by one. Honestly, some took it well, but others did not. Now I think that it just showed me who my real friends are, because real friends stick by you through thick and thin. I learned through all of this that there are many misconceptions about HIV, and they range from the idea that sharing a drink with an HIV positive person is dangerous, that every positive person is a drug addict, or the worst one of all, at least in my opinion, that being diagnosed with HIV is a death sentence. But we all know that none of these stereotypes are true, and that it's time people know this. It's time for people to learn a little before they judge, before they jump to conclusions. So I stand here before you because I will not stay silent anymore, because I will not be afraid. I stand before you as a woman who is HIV positive and isn't afraid to say it. By taking medications every day, by being active, eating healthy, understanding my body, and getting regular checkups, I will live a full and complete life. So, I'm glad I know. Thank you.